I just had dinner with the Queen. Not like, at a restaurant she also happened to be at. I mean with her, at a table. In Buckingham Palace. Silverware for days, flunkies everywhere, the whole 9 yards. It was surreal, absolutely mind-bending. I came home that night still buzzing, my head light with champagne and disbelief, ready to tell Sarah, my wife, everything, every single detail. And then she said it, casually, like she was commenting on the weather, or a smudge on the window. "You are just not sophisticated, are you, Mark?" It hit me like a physical blow. Worse than any punch, really. 'Cause it wasn't just a slight. It was a total dismissal of everything that had just happened. Everything I'd experienced. It was the cherry on top of years of little digs, little corrections, little looks that always told me I wasn't quite good enough, not quite refined enough for her. I had just dined with actual royalty, navigated a conversation about international diplomacy with a straight face, and somehow managed not to spill anything on the priceless Persian rug. And her takeaway was that, "You want a shocking hook? Here it is." The man who just broke bread with the monarch of an empire came home to be told he wasn't sophisticated by the woman who supposedly loved him. And the worst part? Part of me, a deep, ugly, insecure part, knew exactly what she meant. 'Cause no matter what I did, what grand stage I stood on, I'd never quite measure up to the image she had in her head. But what she didn't know, what neither of us knew at that moment, was that her words weren't just a criticism. They were a symptom. And they would lead us down a path we could never truly come back from. I stood there, my jacket still on, the faint smell of fancy palace air clinging to it, and my mouth just hung open. I think I made some sort of strangled noise like a dying duck. Sarah didn't even look up from her phone. She was scrolling through something, probably some fashion blog or a travel influencer's feed. Her hair was perfect, her silk robe draped just so. She had this way of making even lounging look elegant. Me, I probably looked like a startled badger in a borrowed suit. She finally lifted her eyes, blue as ice, and met mine. "What?" she said, her voice flat, devoid of curiosity, let alone enthusiasm for my evening. "Did you break something?" I finally found my voice, thin and reedy. "I'd just had dinner with the Queen, Sarah." I tried to inject some awe into it, some wonder, but it came out sounding almost whiny. She sighed, a long, dramatic exhale. "Yes, Mark, I know. You've only mentioned it 100 times since the invitation arrived. Did you actually manage not to embarrass yourself this time?" Cutting edge of that question went straight through the last vestiges of my excitement. I thought I did okay. I mumbled. She was very nice. We talked about her corgis. Sarah snorted. "Of course you did. You always managed to find the most pedestrian topic. You could have talked about foreign policy, the Commonwealth, the socio-economic impact of Brexit on the global stage. But corgis, Mark, honest." She shook her head, a slow, deliberate movement that spoke volumes. "It's like you deliberately try to be common. Common." My voice cracked. I was at Buckingham Palace with the actual Queen. What could be less common than that? She finally put down her phone, her gaze sharp, dissecting me. "It's not about where you are, Mark. It's about who you are. The way you carry yourself, the way you speak, the things you choose to focus on. Did you even know which fork to use?" And there it was, the deep insecurity. I'd spent half the dinner trying to copy the person next to me, just hoping I picked up the right implement for the right course. My stomach clenched. "I managed," I said, trying to sound defiant. "I didn't make a fool of myself, didn't you?" Her eyebrow arched. "'Cause I got a text from your mother earlier. She said she saw a clip on the news, something about you tripping over a footman and almost sending a tray of canapés flying. my face flushed hot. Oh God. Not that moment of utter mortification. It had been quick. Just a stumble, I'd caught myself. And the footman had been very gracious, but yes, a split second of clumsy near disaster. And the cameras, of course, were always there. It was nothing, I insisted, but my voice was weak. I recovered quickly. Nobody really noticed. Oh, Mark. She laughed, a short, humorless sound. Everyone noticed. It was all over Twitter for a while. The commoner who almost took out the Queen's appetizers. It was a moment, Mark, and not in a good way. She picked up her phone again, dismissing me, dismissing my entire evening. See, this is what I mean. You just can't shake it, can you? That unsophisticated streak. I felt something inside me crumple. All the bravado, all the lingering magic of the palace, drained out of me like water from a sieve. This wasn't a new conversation. It was an old, festering wound that she seemed to delight in prodding. It started subtly years ago, a gentle correction here, a suggestion there. My choice of shirts, my pronunciation of certain words, my preference for a pub over a fancy cocktail bar. Slowly, subtly, she had chipped away at my self-esteem, making me question every natural impulse, every genuine laugh, every unmannered comfort I found. And now, after the most extraordinary night of my life, she had not only dismissed it, but used it as further proof of my inherent lack. I walked away from her, the silence of the large house suddenly deafening, and went straight to the shower, not to wash away the palace, but to wash away the bitter taste of her words. It was only later, lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, that I started to wonder. How had I, Mark Jennings, a guy who once won a pie-eating contest at a county fair, even ended up having dinner with the Queen in the first place? And why did my wife, who claimed to love me, seem to despise the very core of who I was? The answer to how I got the Queen's dinner invite, and indeed to a lot of things about my life, started with a clumsy fall and a very large fountain. 'Twas last summer, a scorching July day, and Sarah and I were at a charity garden party. It was one of Sarah's favorite types of events. Manicured lawns, polite chit-chat, women in ridiculous hats, and men in suits too hot for the weather. She loved the pretense of it all, the chance to rub shoulders with people she considered important. I, on the other hand, found it excruciating. I preferred jeans, a t-shirt, and a good book, or maybe a lively football match with my mates. But Sarah insisted. It's good for our social standing, Mark, she'd say, as if we were minor nobility. I remember that day clearly. The heat was oppressive, and I was sweating through my borrowed suit jacket. Sarah was off networking, which really meant complimenting dresses and name-dropping. I was trying to look engaged while secretly eyeing the nearest exit. I'd found a relatively quiet spot near a large ornate fountain, its water sparkling in the sun. I was thinking about how much I'd rather be cooling my feet in a paddling pool than standing awkwardly in patent leather shoes. Suddenly, a small corgi, one of the Queen's own apparently, darted past my legs chasing a butterfly. It was an adorable, fluffy blur of energy. Another dog, a much larger Yappia Terrier mix belonging to some minor dignitary, came charging after it, looking less like it wanted to play, and more like it wanted to maul. Without thinking, pure instinct, I lunged forward to scoop up the corgi, intending to protect it from the approaching furry missile. My foot caught on a loose paving stone. Next thing I knew, I was flailing, a cartoon character in slow motion. The corgi yelped, startled, but I held it tight. My arms windmilled, and then, with a splash that echoed across the perfectly manicured lawn, I tumbled backward, straight into the fountain. It wasn't a shallow bird bath. This was a proper deep fountain, complete with a cherub statue spouting water from its mouth. I went in with a magnificent, embarrassing plop, landing with a splash that soaked me from head to toe. Water streamed from my hair, my suit, my shoes. The corgi, safe and surprisingly dry in my arms, looked up at me with wide, innocent eyes, as if to say, "What just happened?" For a split second, the garden party went completely silent. Everyone, and I mean everyone, turned to stare. Sarah, who was halfway across the lawn chatting with someone important, froze, her eyes wide with horror and a flicker of something that looked like mortification. I stood up dripping, the water making my suit cling uncomfortably. My first thought was, "Oh God, Sarah is going to kill me." My second thought was, "At least I am finally cool." Then a ripple went through the crowd. A small, elegant woman, surrounded by a discreet entourage, stepped forward. It was the Queen herself. She was known for her love of corgis, and apparently this was one of her favorites. She took in the scene, me, soaking wet, holding her precious dog, which now seemed perfectly content to be cradled in my arms despite my clumsy entry. A slow smile spread across her face. It started as a tiny twitch at the corner of her lips, then blossomed into a full, genuine laugh, a proper, hearty laugh. It was infectious. One by one, other people started to chuckle, then laugh openly. The tension broke. I handed the corgi back to one of the Queen's aides, still dripping, and offered a weak, embarrassed smile. "Apologies, Your Majesty," I stammered, water dripping from my nose. "Just trying to save the little chap." The Queen, still smiling, stepped closer. "A rather dramatic rescue, Mr. Jennings," she said, her eyes twinkling. "But a very effective one. One must admire a man who acts on instinct to protect the innocent, even if it means sacrificing one's dignity and one's expensive suit." She paused, then added, "You know, one doesn't often encounter such spontaneity at these events. It's quite refreshing." She then turned to her aide. "Do make sure Mr. Jennings is supplied with dry clothes and a good cup of tea, and perhaps an invitation to a less hazardous environment. Say dinner at the palace when things are a little less wet." My jaw dropped. Dinner at the palace? She had to be joking. But her aide was already nodding, scribbling something down. Sarah, who had now managed to reach my side, looked absolutely stunned. Her face was a mixture of horror at my public embarrassment and disbelief at the Queen's unexpected invitation. "Mark, what was that? Are you trying to deliberately ruin my reputation? And dinner with the Queen? She was probably just being polite. She won't actually follow through." But she did. A thick, embossed invitation arrived 2 weeks later, personally addressed to me, Mark Jennings. My name. Not Mr. and Mrs. Jennings, just Mr. Mark Jennings. Queen, it seemed, wanted to dine with the man who fell into the fountain, not his discerning wife. That, right there, was the start of everything. The first crack in the carefully constructed facade of our lives, even if I didn't see it then. It set the stage for a dinner and a conversation that would reshape my entire world. The days leading up to the dinner were a blur of nervous anticipation and Sarah's incessant instructions. She was suddenly obsessed with my every move, every word, every piece of cutlery I picked up. "Mark, darling, remember, finger bowls are for rinsing, not drinking," she'd say. A strained smile plastered on her face as I practiced with a mixing bowl in the kitchen. "And never, ever use the wrong fork. There are specific forks for specific dishes. It's an art form." She drilled me on posture, on small talk, on the correct way to hold a wine glass. It was like preparing for a high-stakes exam, where the only grade that mattered was sophisticated. I knew she was doing it because she wanted me to represent her well, but it felt less like help. and more like an intense, never-ending critique. I started to feel like a performing seal, terrified of getting something wrong. The day of the dinner arrived, a cool autumn evening. I wore a rented tuxedo that felt stiff and unfamiliar. Sarah had fussed over my tie for 20 minutes before declaring it acceptable. She wasn't invited to the dinner itself, which was a source of great irritation for her, but she insisted on driving me to the palace gates, giving me one last stern look before I stepped out of the car. "Don't embarrass us, Mark," she said, her voice tight. "For God's sake, don't fall into another fountain." The palace itself was a spectacle. Liveried footmen, grand staircases, glittering chandeliers that looked like they belonged in a fairy tale. I felt like a very small, very out-of-place mouse. My heart hammered against my ribs as I was led through a labyrinth of opulent corridors, past oil paintings of stern-faced ancestors, until I arrived at a magnificent dining hall. There were perhaps 20 guests, all looking terribly important and impeccably dressed. Dukes and duchesses, ambassadors, a renowned historian, a famous conductor. And then there was me, Mark Jennings, the accidental fountain diver. The Queen was already seated at the head of a long, polished table. She gave me a small, warm smile as I was ushered to my seat, 2 chairs down from her. I tried to remember Sarah's countless instructions. Keep your hands in your lap. Don't speak unless spoken to. Don't interrupt. Don't slurp your soup. Don't look at the silverware too long. My mind was a whirlwind of do's and don'ts. The dinner started. The food was exquisite. Tiny works of art on plates. I found myself staring at the array of forks and spoons, trying to remember which one was for what. I watched the Duchess across from me, subtly mimicking her movements. She picked up the outermost fork for the salad. Good, I did the same. So far, so good. Conversation flowed around me, elegant and intellectual. They discussed ancient history, foreign policy, the nuances of classical music. I mostly nodded, offering polite ums and "oh reallys." I felt like an imposter desperately trying to blend in. At one point, the Queen turned to me. "Mr. Jennings," she said, her voice clear and kind. "I trust your evening is proving less eventful than your last visit to one of my properties." A ripple of polite chuckles went around the table. I flushed, but forced a smile. "Much less wet, Your Majesty," I replied, trying for a light tone. "And considerably less chaotic." She chuckled. "Indeed. Though I must confess that was quite the spectacle. My corgi Pip still talks about it, in his own way, of course." She paused, her eyes twinkling. "Tell me, Mr. Jennings, what do you do when you are not rescuing royal pets from their more aggressive counterparts?" This was my chance to talk about my work. I am a graphic designer specializing in branding for small independent businesses. It's not exactly highbrow, but I am proud of it. I opened my mouth to explain, to try and make it sound interesting, important, sophisticated. But then I thought of Sarah, of her constant corrections, and suddenly my throat felt tight. I design logos, Your Majesty," I stammered, feeling utterly inadequate. "For local businesses, plumbers, bakers, that sort of thing." A small silence fell. I braced myself for a polite dismissal, for her to turn to the ambassador next to her and resume their discussion of trade agreements. But the Queen merely nodded, her expression thoughtful. "Ah, branding," she mused. "Most important. A good logo can convey so much, can it not? It is the immediate face of an enterprise. It communicates trust, quality, aspiration, indeed the very essence of identity. One might even say it is the modern equivalent of a coat of arms." "Do you enjoy your work, Mr. Jennings?" I blinked. She wasn't dismissing me. She was engaging, and she saw my simple job as something meaningful. "Yes, Your Majesty," I said, a little more confidently now. "I love it. Helping small businesses find their voice, their unique look. It's very satisfying, indeed," she said, a genuine smile returning. "There is great merit in that. To help others succeed, to give them a distinctive mark in the world. That, Mr. Jennings, is a valuable skill." I felt a warmth spread through me. It wasn't just politeness. It felt like genuine interest, genuine respect. She hadn't judged my job for not being sophisticated enough. She had found the sophistication in it. It was a stark contrast to Sarah's usual reaction to my work, which was usually a polite nod and a quick change of subject, to her own, more glamorous job in public relations for a luxury brand. The rest of the evening continued in a similar vein. I mostly listened, but when I did speak, the Queen somehow managed to make me feel heard, even when I said something that I felt was slightly clumsy or unsophisticated. There was one moment, towards the end of the meal, when I almost committed a cardinal sin. I was reaching for the salt cellar. My hand brushed a crystal water glass, and it wobbled precariously. My heart leapt into my throat. Disaster. But before it could fall, the Queen's hand, surprisingly quick, reached out and steadied it. She gave me a small, knowing smile. "These glasses are rather delicate, aren't they?" she murmured, as if nothing untoward had happened. No public admonishment, no raised eyebrows. Just a quiet, understanding gesture. That was true class, I thought. True sophistication. Not just knowing the rules, but knowing when to bend them, or simply ignore them, for the sake of kindness. I left the palace that night, feeling surprisingly light. A sense of quiet triumph swelling in my chest. I hadn't just survived, I had, in my own clumsy way, connected. I had been seen and accepted. Not despite my perceived lack of sophistication, but perhaps even because of my authenticity. I couldn't wait to tell Sarah about it. Oh, how wrong I was. I walked through the door, my heart still humming with the unusual quiet joy of the evening. The palace was an hour's drive from our house, and the journey had been filled with me, replaying every moment, every word, every subtle glance from the Queen. I felt lighter somehow, less burdened by the usual anxieties that clung to me like invisible weights. Maybe Sarah would see it too, I thought. Maybe she'd see that my value wasn't in some external polish, but in something else, something the Queen had somehow seen. The house was dark, save for the soft glow of the living room lamp. Sarah was curled up on the sofa, still in her silk robe, a book open on her lap, though her eyes were closed. She must have fallen asleep waiting for me. I felt a pang of tenderness. Despite everything, she was my wife. I cleared my throat softly. Her eyes fluttered open. She blinked, then slowly sat up, stretching languidly. "Mark? Is that you? What time is it?" "Just after midnight," I said, trying to keep the excitement from bubbling over too much. "It was incredible, Sarah. Absolutely incredible. You wouldn't believe it. The food, the conversation, the Queen herself." She stifled a yawn. Yes, I suppose it was quite the spectacle. Did you behave yourself?" I frowned slightly. Her tone was so flat, so devoid of real interest. "I think so. I mean, I almost knocked over a glass at one point, but the Queen actually caught it. She was so gracious about it. And she talked about my work, Sarah, my graphic design. She said it was important, like a modern coat of arms." I was practically bouncing on my toes, eager to share this validation. Sarah's eyes, however, seemed to glaze over. She picked up her phone, which was lying beside her on the cushion, and started scrolling. "Mm-hmm," she murmured distractedly. "Well, that's nice. So you didn't completely humiliate me then." The air went out of me slowly. "Sarah, you don't understand." She wasn't condescending at all. She was genuinely interested, and I didn't even use the wrong fork once. I added, trying to lighten the mood, to get a smile out of her. She finally put the phone down, but her gaze was still distant, almost cold. She looked around the living room, her eyes lingering on the new painting we'd bought recently, a modern abstract piece she'd insisted on. "You know," she said, her voice sounding oddly detached, "I was looking at this painting earlier, and it just made me think." My heart sank. I knew where this was going. She always started conversations like this. "Oh?" I asked, dread coiling in my stomach. "Yes." "It's so sophisticated, isn't it? The lines, the colors, the way it makes you think. It's got layers, depth. It's the kind of thing someone with real taste appreciates." She paused, then her eyes finally settled on me, assessing, critical. "And then I look at you, Mark, after your grand evening with royalty, and I don't know." She waved a dismissive hand. "You are still just you. So earnest, so simple." Then came the words, delivered with a sigh, as if she was stating an obvious, regrettable truth. "You are just not sophisticated, are you?" It wasn't a question, it was a statement. An undeniable fact in her mind. And it landed with a sickening thud, right in the center of my chest. All the joy, all the triumph, all the quiet pride from the evening vanished instantly, replaced by a familiar ache of inadequacy. Queen, surrounded by all that pomp and circumstance, had made me feel worthy. My wife, sitting in our comfortable, familiar living room, had effortlessly stripped it all away. I could feel my face tightening. "What is that supposed to mean, Sarah?" My voice was low, barely a whisper. "After everything, after tonight, that's what you say?" She shrugged, picked up her book again. "It's just an observation, Mark. Don't be so sensitive. You know how you are. You always say the obvious thing. You laugh too loudly sometimes. You prefer beer to a good claret. It's just not sophisticated. It's not a bad thing necessarily. It's just who you are. But it was a bad thing. For me it was, and for her it clearly was. It was a failing, a character flaw. It meant I wasn't enough. Not enough for her. Not enough for the life she clearly envisioned for us. The silence stretched between us, thick with unspoken accusations and years of accumulated hurt. I felt a coldness spread through me deeper than the autumn night air. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. What was the point? She saw what she wanted to see. And what she saw was a man who, despite dining with a queen, was fundamentally, irrevocably unsophisticated. I turned and walked away, the weight of her words pressing down on me, heavy and suffocating. The magic of the palace, the warmth of the queen's smile, all faded into the background. All that remained was the chilling echo of Sarah's judgment. And in that moment I knew something fundamental had shifted. Something had broken, and I wasn't sure it could ever be put back together again. That night, lying in bed, the silence between us stretched vast and empty like a desert. Sarah slept soundly beside me, her breathing soft and even. I, on the other hand, was wide awake, replaying her words, her tone, the casual dismissal that cut deeper than any shout or argument. "You are just not sophisticated, are you?" It wasn't just about the Queen's dinner. It was the culmination of 1,000 tiny cuts. I thought back to the beginning of our relationship. We met at university. She was studying art history, graceful and intellectually curious. I was doing a practical design course, more interested in solving problems than dissecting paintings. We were different, yes. But back then, it felt like those differences complemented each other. She found my down-to-earth practicality endearing. I was charmed by her elegance and ambition. She used to laugh when I made a mess in the kitchen, calling it endearingly chaotic. Now it was just messy. The shifts had been gradual, almost imperceptible at first. A gentle suggestion about my wardrobe. Mark, perhaps a polo shirt, instead of that old band t-shirt for dinner with my parents. Then it became more pointed. You really should learn to appreciate good wine, darling. It shows a certain maturity. My jokes, which she once found funny, started eliciting only a tight smile and a change of subject. My love for noisy football matches became distasteful. My enthusiasm for cheesy action movies was unrefined. It wasn't just about social graces either. It extended to our home, our choices. She insisted on minimalist decor, sleek, modern furniture, curated art. My idea of comfort, a worn armchair, a stack of books, a perpetually brewing pot of coffee, slowly disappeared, replaced by carefully chosen pieces that looked beautiful but felt sterile. We ate fancy, obscure foods I couldn't pronounce, instead of the simple, hearty meals I preferred. Our conversations revolved around topics she deemed important. Gallery openings, classical concerts, the latest architectural marvels. When I tried to talk about my day, about the challenges of branding a new independent bookstore, or the funny things my mates said, her eyes would glaze over, and she'd eventually pivot to something about her work, which always sounded far more glamorous and socially significant. I remember one particularly painful evening about a year ago. We were at a dinner party at her parents' house. Her father, a retired diplomat, was holding court, discussing some arcane point of international law. I, trying to contribute, made a slightly clumsy joke about bureaucracy. It fell flat. Sarah quickly interjected, changing the subject, and later, when we were in the car, she snapped, "Mark, you just don't understand the nuances of these conversations. You can't just blurt out whatever comes into your head. It's not appropriate. It makes us look bad, us, that was the key." My perceived lack of sophistication wasn't just about me. It was about how I reflected on her. It was as if I was a stain on her perfectly tailored image, a smudge on her carefully polished reputation. She wanted to ascend, socially and professionally, and I, in my simple, unvarnished way, was holding her back. I started to withdraw. I stopped telling jokes around her. I chose my words carefully, edited my stories. I dressed more to her taste than my own. I started to dread social gatherings where she would be scrutinizing my every move. The man she fell in love with, the endearingly chaotic one, was slowly being chiseled away, replaced by a quieter, more anxious version of myself. I was trying so hard to be what she wanted, to fit into her sophisticated world, that I was losing myself. And the heartbreaking irony was that the Queen, a woman who literally embodied the highest echelons of sophistication and tradition, had accepted me, genuinely as I was. She saw the simple, instinctive act, the authentic response, and found value in it. My own wife saw the same thing and found it lacking. It wasn't just that her words hurt, it was that they confirmed a terrible fear that had been growing in me for years. That she didn't truly see me anymore. Or worse, that she did see me, and she simply didn't like what she saw. That she wished I was someone else, someone more like the men in her orbit. The ones who knew about vintage wines, and abstract art, and international diplomacy, without having to fake. The warmth I'd felt for Sarah, the love that had been the foundation of our life, was slowly, painfully eroding. It was being replaced by annoying resentment, a feeling of inadequacy, and a profound loneliness. We were living together, sleeping in the same bed, but we were miles apart, separated by a chasm of unspoken expectations and unfulfilled desires. Queen's dinner, meant to be a high point, had instead become a brutal spotlight on the gaping hole in our marriage. And lying there, staring at the ceiling, I realized I couldn't keep pretending. Something had to give. The morning after the Queen's dinner, the air in the house was thick with unspoken tension. Sarah moved around with an almost exaggerated grace, preparing her elaborate morning smoothie, humming a tuneless little melody. She acted as if nothing had happened, as if a casual demolition of my self-worth was just a normal Tuesday night. I, on the other hand, felt hollowed out, like a ghost in my own home. I managed to choke down a piece of toast, avoiding eye contact. When she finally sat down across from me, a pristine linen napkin on her lap, I decided I couldn't just let it go. Not this time. The sting was too fresh, too raw. "Sarah," I began, my voice a little shaky, "we need to talk about what you said last night." She looked up, her blue eyes wide and innocent. "What did I say, darling? I was half asleep." The feigned ignorance made my blood boil. "You said I wasn't sophisticated. After I spent an evening at Buckingham Palace, you dismissed the entire experience and me along with it." She sighed, a familiar, exasperated sound. "Oh, Mark, are you still on about that? It was just an observation. You are so sensitive, you know, I love you." "Do I?" The question escaped before I could stop. "Because sometimes it feels like you love an idea of me, an idea of who you want me to be. And when I don't fit that idea, you just dismiss me." Her jaw tightened. "That's unfair. I just want you to be the best version of yourself. Is that so wrong? I want us to be a couple that commands respect, that fits in with the circles I'm trying to move us into." "Circles?" I scoffed. "Is that what this is about? Your social standing, my sophistication, is just a costume for your ambition." Her face went pale. "Don't be ridiculous. This is about us, Mark, about our life together. I want us to have a beautiful, elegant life. And sometimes you don't quite fit. You prefer the simple, the easy. I am just trying to encourage you to broaden your horizons." "Broaden my horizons?" My voice rose, despite my best efforts to keep it calm. "I just had dinner with the Queen, Sarah. My horizons don't get much broader than that. And I felt more accepted, more seen by her in one evening than I have by you in years." Her eyes flashed. "That's a nasty thing to say, Mark. I am your wife. I care about you. I wouldn't spend so much time and effort trying to refine you if I didn't care." "Refine me?" I pushed my chair back, the scraping sound loud in the quiet kitchen. "Oh, remake me." "Tea here is different, Sarah. I feel like you are constantly trying to sand down my edges, to make me into something I am not. The guy you married, the one who fell into the fountain, the one who laughs too loud, the one who prefers beer. That guy isn't good enough for you anymore, is he?" She stood up abruptly, knocking her napkin to the floor. "This is absurd. I'm not having this conversation. You are being dramatic. I have a meeting." She turned to leave, but I reached out and grabbed her arm, gently but firmly. "Number, we're not done. This isn't just about last night. This is about everything. All the little comments, the condescending looks, the constant criticism. I am tired of feeling like I am a disappointment to you, Sarah." She pulled her arm away, her face a mask of hurt and anger. "You are a disappointment to yourself, Mark. You just won't admit it. You are comfortable in your mediocrity. I am just trying to push you to be better, to aspire to more." Her voice trembled slightly, betraying a crack in her composure. "You think I like being the one who always has to push? Who has to be the one to worry about appearances? To make sure we're always presenting our best selves to the world? Why does it matter so much to you, Sarah? I pleaded. Why does what other people think define everything? Why can't we just be ourselves? Her eyes, usually so composed, now had a frantic, almost desperate look to them. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. She just shook her head, a strange, haunted expression on her face. And then she turned and practically ran out of the kitchen, leaving me standing there, the silence ringing my ears. I watched her go, a fresh wave of confusion washing over me. There was something in her eyes, something beyond simple annoyance or anger, something deeper, but I couldn't quite place it. All I knew was that our marriage, once a refuge, now felt like a battleground, and I was losing. After our explosive non-conversation in the kitchen, Sarah became even more distant. She would leave for work earlier than usual and come home later. She spent more time in her home office, door closed, on important calls. Our evenings became a series of polite silences, punctuated by the clinking of cutlery or the murmur of the television. The air felt heavy, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. I tried to bridge the gap, sending her texts during the day, asking how her meetings went. Her replies were always brief, functional. Fine, busy, talk later. The talk later never happened. I started to feel isolated in my own home. My friends noticed too. My best mate, Tom, who I'd known since childhood, called me one evening. "You sound a bit down, mate," he said, his voice genuinely concerned. "Everything all right with Sarah?" I hesitated. How much could I tell him? How much of this messy internal marital struggle could I explain? "Yeah, just usual stuff," I mumbled. "Work's been a bit stressful." "Right," Tom said, clearly not convinced. "'Cause Sarah's been a bit off lately, hasn't she? My wife Jess saw her at the gym last week. Said she looked really tired, almost gaunt. And she was on her phone the whole time, looking really stressed. Is she all right?" My first instinct was to defend Sarah, to say she was just busy with a high-powered job. But then I remembered the frantic look in her eyes that morning, in the kitchen, the way she'd run from the room. She had been looking tired, I realized. More than just busy tired, a deep, bone-weary exhaustion that seemed to settle around her eyes. I had been so wrapped up in my own hurt, my own feeling of being judged, that I hadn't truly seen her. "I don't know, Tom," I admitted, a knot forming in my stomach. "She's been stressed with work, I guess. Her job in PR is pretty demanding." "Yeah, but this felt different, according to Jess," Tom pressed. "She said Sarah looked really fragile, almost like she was carrying the weight of the world." The conversation ended, but Tom's words lingered. Fragile, weight of the world. It didn't fit with the image of my cool, composed, sophisticated wife. I started observing her more closely, not through the lens of my own hurt, but with a growing sense of unease. She was losing weight. Her clothes, which always fit her perfectly, now seemed to hang a little loose. She spent hours on the phone, often whispering or retreating to her office. If I walked past, she'd quickly hang up or lower her voice to an inaudible murmur. She rarely ate dinner with me, claiming she'd eaten at the office or wasn't hungry. She'd always been a meticulous dresser, but lately she seemed to be wearing the same few outfits. A little creased, a little less put together. Her hair, usually styled perfectly, was often just pulled back in a messy bun. These were tiny things, but they were so un-Sarah. So unsophisticated in the way she defined it. One evening, I found her sitting alone in the dark living room, staring out the window. It was late, past midnight. The house was cold. I paused at the doorway. "Sarah?" She startled, her head snapping towards me. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her face blotchy. She had been crying. My stomach dropped. I hadn't seen her cry in years. Not since her grandmother died, and even then it was a quiet, contained grief. This was different. This was raw. "What's wrong?" I asked, my voice softer than I intended. She quickly wiped her eyes, trying to compose herself. "Nothing. Just a bad day. You should go back to bed. Sarah, please." I walked over and sat on the armrest of the sofa next to her. "You've been like this for weeks. Something's going on. Please tell me." She hesitated, her gaze darting away. It's really nothing. Just work stress. My boss is being a nightmare." I didn't believe her. This was more than a demanding boss. This was despair. "Sarah, you know you can talk to me. We're married. Whatever it is, we can face it together." I reached out, gently touching her arm. She flinched. "No, don't. Just leave it, Mark." Her voice cracked, a tremor running through her. I pulled my hand back, feeling helpless. This wasn't the strong, composed Sarah I knew. This was someone else, someone I barely recognized. The woman who constantly judged my lack of sophistication was crumbling before my eyes, and I had no idea why. It was a terrifying realization. I had been so wrapped up in my own hurt, in the feeling that I wasn't enough for her, that I hadn't even considered that she might be the one who wasn't enough for herself. And as I watched her, hunched in the dark, silent tears running down her face, a terrifying thought began to form. Maybe her constant need for sophistication, her relentless criticism of me, wasn't about me at all. Maybe it was about her. And whatever it was clearly breaking her. And slowly, devastatingly, it was breaking us. The next few days were excruciating. Sarah remained withdrawn, her tears the other night going unacknowledged between us, like a shared secret we both pretended didn't exist. She was a ghost in our home. I felt helpless, consumed by a growing fear. What was happening to her? Her job, her image, her desire for sophistication. These were the cornerstones of her identity. If something was wrong with that, it would shake her to her core. I decided I couldn't wait for her to tell me. I needed to know. It felt invasive, but also necessary. I remembered her hushed phone calls, her quick hang-ups. One afternoon when she was out, I went into her home office. It was usually meticulously tidy, everything in its place. Today, it was a mess. Papers strewn across the desk, a coffee cup with dried rings, her laptop half open. She must have left in a hurry. My eyes scanned the desk. Among the jumble of documents, a formal-looking envelope caught my eye. It was from her company's HR department. My heart began to pound. It felt wrong to open it, a violation of her privacy, but something compelled me. The desperation in her eyes, the way she had crumbled. I picked it up, my fingers trembling slightly. The letter was short, formal, and brutal. It was a termination letter. Sarah had been let go from her high-powered job in public relations. The date on the letter was almost 2 months ago, just a week before my Queen's dinner invitation arrived. 2 months. She had been carrying this burden, this secret, for 2 months. My mind raced back. The timing clicked into place. The garden party, my clumsy fall into the fountain, the Queen's invitation. All of that had happened around the time she was fired. My Queen's dinner, her seemingly petty comment about my lack of sophistication, her increasing withdrawal, her sleepless nights, her tears. It all made a terrible, heartbreaking sense. Her job wasn't just a job to Sarah. It was her identity. It was prestigious, glamorous, high status. It was the epitome of sophistication in her world. She had worked relentlessly to climb the corporate ladder, to earn her place amongst the elite. She lived for the events, the exclusive clients, the feeling of being at the top of her game, and now it was gone. Just like that. And she hadn't told me. She had been living with this crushing secret, this devastating blow to her carefully constructed self-image, all alone. Suddenly, her constant criticisms of my unsophisticated nature took on a new horrifying meaning. It wasn't just about me being me, it was about her. She was losing control of her own sophisticated world, her own identity. My perceived lack of sophistication, my easy comfort with being myself, must have been a painful contrast to her spiraling anxiety. Maybe it was a desperate attempt to exert control over something, anything, when her own life was falling apart. Maybe she was projecting her own feelings of inadequacy onto me. Or maybe, in her pain, she lashed out at the one thing that still seemed steady and unchangeable, my stubbornly unrefined nature. The "you are just not sophisticated, are you?" wasn't a casual dig. It was a cry for help, a reflection of her own crumbling world. She wasn't just criticizing me, she was criticizing the world she felt she was losing, a world I represented in its unvarnished form. She was afraid and alone. I sat down heavily in her chair, the letter still clutched in my hand, guilt, sharp and cold, twisted in my gut. I had been so consumed by my own hurt, my own bruised ego, my own feeling of being judged. I had stewed in resentment, believing she was simply a snob, deliberately trying to diminish me. And all this time, she had been drowning. She had been trying to stay afloat in a sea of despair, and I, her husband, had been too blind, too selfish to see it. Pain she must have been in, silently carrying such a heavy burden. The shame she must have felt, unable to admit failure, especially to me, the man she probably felt was already beneath her in some social sense. Her relentless drive for sophistication, that carefully built facade, had crumbled, and she was too proud, or too broken, to ask for help. When I heard her car pull into the driveway, I quickly put the letter back, arranging the papers as best I could to make it seem untouched. I rushed out of the office, my mind reeling. I had to talk to her. Not about my hurt, not about her words, but about her pain, her secret. The heartbreaking irony was that my biggest fear, her seeing me as unsophisticated, was probably just a reflection of her biggest fear, herself being seen as a failure. And it was destroying her, and in turn it was destroying us. My anger had vanished, replaced by a profound sorrow. How could I have been so utterly blind? When Sarah walked in, she looked even more exhausted than usual. Her shoulders were slumped, her face pale. She barely acknowledged me, just dropping her keys on the hall table with a weary thud. "Long day?" I asked, my voice carefully neutral, trying to hide the tremor of emotion running through me. She gave a small, humorless laugh. Could say that. Just another day in the glamorous world of PR. The sarcasm was thick, a bitter edge to her voice I hadn't noticed before, or perhaps just hadn't recognized for what it was. My heart ached. She was still pretending, still carrying this immense weight alone. I knew I couldn't just blurt out, "I know you got fired." That would be another betrayal. I had to approach it carefully, gently, with the compassion I now realized I should have shown her weeks ago. "Sarah," I started, stepping closer to her. "You've been so stressed lately, more than usual. I am worried about you." She turned away, walking towards the kitchen. "I am fine, Mark. Just a bit tired." "No, you are not," I said, following her. "You haven't been fine for a long time. You are losing weight. You are not sleeping. You are crying in the dark. And you are shutting me out." I took a deep breath. "What's really going on, Sarah?" She stopped by the counter, her back to me. Her shoulders began to shake, subtly at first, then more violently. A strangled sob escaped her. "Nothing," she choked out, her voice muffled. "Just leave me alone." I stepped forward, putting my hand gently on her shoulder. "Please, Sarah, Whatever it is, you don't have to carry it by yourself. I am here. I am your husband." She spun around, tears streaming down her face, her eyes wild with a mixture of shame, despair, and anger. "You don't understand," she cried, her voice cracking. "You never understand. You are so uncomplicated. Everything is always so easy for you. You don't have to pretend. You don't have to prove anything to anyone. What are you talking about?" I asked, my voice soft, trying to soothe her. "My job," she finally burst out, the words tumbling out in a torrent. "I lost my job, Mark. 2 months ago. I was let go. Laid off. Redundant, the company is downsizing, they said. But it was me. I was the one who wasn't good enough. All those years of work, all those sacrifices, all that climbing, and it just ended." Her voice dissolved into raw sobs. I pulled her into my arms, holding her tightly as she crumpled against me, shaking, sobbing uncontrollably. The feel of her body, so fragile, so broken, hit me with a fresh wave of sorrow. This was my wife, the woman who had always seemed so strong, so poised, so perfectly in control. And she was utterly shattered. "I am so sorry, Sarah," I whispered, stroking her hair. "Why didn't you tell me?" She pulled back slightly, her face tear-streaked and distorted with pain. "How could I? How could I tell you, of all people? You, who just sails through life happy with your simple little projects. You who doesn't care what anyone thinks." My parents, they were always so proud of my career. My friends, they all look up to me, and you always found my ambition a bit much. I couldn't face the pity or the judgment. "Judgment from me?" I asked gently. "Sarah, never. I would never judge you." "Yes, you would," she insisted, pulling away completely, her voice thick with anguish. "Or you'd try to fix it. Or you'd just understand it too easily. You don't know what it's like, Mark. To have to fight for every scrap of respect. To constantly prove yourself. To always feel like you are one step away from being found out. To feel like you always have to be perfect, sophisticated, untouchable." She gasped for breath, her chest heaving. "And then I look at you, so effortlessly yourself, and I couldn't bear it. I couldn't bear that you just are, while I have to work so hard for everything. And now it's all gone. And I am just nothing." The heartbreaking truth hung in the air between us. Her constant need for sophistication, her relentless criticism of my lack thereof. It wasn't about me at all. It was about her own deep-seated insecurity, her fear of not being enough. A fear that had now materialized in the most devastating way. Her sophisticated persona wasn't a choice. It was a desperate shield she had built around herself, and now it had shattered. And her words to me, those 5 gut-wrenching words, "You are just not sophisticated, are you?" They weren't a judgment, they were a projection. A scream of her own fear, her own feeling of inadequacy, aimed at the one person she felt safe enough to break down in front of, even if she couldn't admit it consciously. The man who was invited to dinner with the Queen because of an unsophisticated act of kindness. The irony was devastating. The revelation of Sarah's secret hit me like a physical blow, stripping away my own anger and resentment, leaving only a profound, aching sorrow. All this time, I had felt like the injured party, the one being judged and found wanting. Now, I saw her as the one truly suffering, silently, desperate. My unsophisticated self had been a mirror she couldn't bear to look into, reflecting a simplicity and ease she felt she could never achieve, and which now mocked her in her professional downfall. For days after she confessed, Sarah remained fragile. The floodgates had opened, and the dam of her composure had truly broken. She cried for hours, talking about the humiliation, the fear of telling her parents, her friends, what she would do next. She spoke of the intense pressure she'd always felt to excel, to embody an image of success and elegance. An image I now understood was largely a performance. Her family, she explained, had always prized outward appearances, social standing, and achievement above all else. Her whole life had been shaped by the need to prove herself, to be seen as the sophisticated one. And then there was me. The man who fell into fountains, who liked cheap beer, who made simple logos, and who somehow, despite all that, got invited to dinner with the Queen. My effortless lack of pretension, which I had always felt she judged, was probably unbearable for her. It was everything she felt she couldn't be, even as her carefully constructed world collapsed. I tried to be there for her, truly there. I made her tea, listened to her cries, held her hand. I told her it didn't matter, that we would be okay, that her worth wasn't tied to a job title. And in my heart, I meant it. My anger had dissolved into empathy. How could I stay angry at someone suffering so profoundly? But the words she had said to me, those 5 soul-crushing words, still hung in the air between us, unspoken but present. You are just not sophisticated, are you? I understood the context now. I understood that they weren't meant as a personal attack in the way I had initially perceived them. They were born of her own pain, her own terror. But understanding didn't erase the hurt. It just changed the nature of it. It was no longer about her deliberate cruelty. It was about the tragic irony of our lives. She was so desperate to uphold an image of sophistication, and in doing so, she had wounded the very person who loved her most. The person who, in an act of accidental unsophisticated grace, had ironically found himself dining with the ultimate symbol of sophistication. The Queen, who had seen past my clumsiness to my core. My wife, who had been unable to see past her own fear to my loyalty and love. The trust too was broken. Not just because she had hurt me, but because she had hidden such a profound crisis from me. For 2 months she had lived with a secret that was tearing her apart, and she had chosen to project her pain onto me, rather than confide in me. That betrayal of intimacy, the fundamental breakdown of communication, was a wound deeper than any insult. We went through the motions of recovery. Ghoul. She eventually started seeing a therapist, encouraged by my persistent, gentle urging. She applied for new jobs, though her confidence was shattered. Our conversation slowly became less volatile, more functional. But something fundamental had shifted. The laughter was gone. The easy comfort, the unforced connection that once defined us had evaporated. I still loved her in a way. The person she was beneath the carefully constructed facade. The scared, vulnerable woman who had cried in my arms. I loved that part of her. But the hurt lingered. The feeling of being constantly judged, of being seen as less than, had eaten away at my self-worth. And that doesn't just heal overnight. And the knowledge that she could hide such a devastating part of her life from me, that she couldn't trust me with her vulnerability, left a gaping hole in the very fabric of our marriage. The Queen's dinner, which had once seemed like the ultimate validation, now stood as a monument to our undoing. It was the catalyst that brought Sarah's hidden pain to the surface, and in doing so, exposed the fragile, almost transactional nature of our love. We were still together, living in the same house, but we were 2 wounded souls, trying to navigate a landscape irrevocably altered by a lie, a secret, and 5 heartbreaking words. And I knew with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that some things once broken can never truly be mended. Even with all the understanding in the world. The days turned into weeks, then months. Sarah continued her therapy. And slowly, painstakingly, she began to rebuild herself. The raw edges of her pain softened. replaced by a quiet, subdued introspection. She found a new job, less prestigious than her old one, but in a field she genuinely enjoyed, away from the cutthroat world of luxury PR. She started to dress more comfortably, less for show, and stopped critiquing my clothes. She even laughed, occasionally, at one of my clumsy jokes. The old spark, the effortless connection we once shared, never truly returned. It was like a delicate vase that had shattered. You could glue the pieces back together meticulously, carefully, but the cracks would always be visible. The knowledge of her secret, her desperate need for a superficial kind of sophistication, and my own wounded pride had left permanent scars. I still cooked for her sometimes, and she would eat, complimenting the food, but there was no longer the shared joy, the easy banter. We watched movies together, but often in silence, each lost in our own thoughts. The intimacy, the deep knowing of each other, had been replaced by a polite distance. I understood why she had said what she said, why she had hidden her pain. But understanding didn't automatically bring forgiveness. Not for the sting of her words, and certainly not for the deep chasm her secret had opened between us. It was a heartbreak of a different kind now, the heartbreak of understanding a tragedy, but being unable to reverse its effects. I often thought about the Queen's dinner. That night, she had seen something in me that my wife had consistently overlooked or dismissed. She had seen value in my authenticity, in my clumsy honesty, in the very traits Sarah had deemed unsophisticated. The Queen, with all her power and prestige, had exemplified a deeper, truer sophistication. One of empathy, grace, and genuine acceptance, while Sarah, striving for an external veneer of sophistication, had lost touch with her own inner kindness, and ultimately with the truth of our relationship. Sometimes, late at night, I would look at Sarah sleeping beside me. She looked peaceful now, no longer haunted by the demons of her secret, and I would feel a profound sadness. I wished I could go back to the night of the Queen's dinner, not to change what I said or did, but to somehow see past her facade, to notice the cracks earlier, to reach out, to ask the right questions. Maybe we could have caught her before she fell so far, before she felt the need to lash out at me. But life doesn't offer do-overs. We were living with the consequences. Our marriage was a quiet, melancholy arrangement now. We were roommates, friends, perhaps even still lovers in moments. But the unbreakable bond, the feeling of absolute trust and complete acceptance was gone. It had been eroded by years of subtle criticism, and then shattered by a hidden truth. I continued my graphic design work, finding solace in the clear lines and purposeful intent of my designs. I realized that my own form of sophistication wasn't about knowing which fork to use or how to make small talk with royalty. It was about being true to myself, about finding beauty and meaning in the simple things, about building something honest and real. That's what the Queen seemed to appreciate, and that's what I learned to value in myself. Sarah eventually accepted that about me. She stopped trying to change me. But in her acceptance, there was also a quiet resignation. She had given up trying to reshape me into her ideal, but she hadn't fully embraced the man I was. And I, understanding her pain, could no longer fully give myself to a woman who, in her deepest anguish, had used my very essence as a weapon against me. The heartbreaking truth was, we were both free now, in a way. She, from the crushing weight of her secret and the relentless pursuit of an impossible ideal, and I from the suffocating pressure of trying to be someone I wasn't. That freedom came at a cost. The profound, quiet loss of the marriage we once had. A marriage irrevocably broken by the bitter irony of sophistication. A fallen queen, and 5 little words that changed everything. And as I lay there, feeling the distant hum of the world outside, I knew that some wounds, even when understood, never truly heal. They just become a part of who you are.